Hi, Eben. Thanks so much for being on the podcast today. It's our first of the year, so you're the lucky first guest of the year, and I'm super excited. Being into all of the cannabis research in the last 8 months, I am ecstatic to have you on the show and hear your story and everything that you're doing as well. So welcome.
Thank you so much, Jodi. I'm honored to be the first guest of the year.
So Evan, let's jump straight in and I'll let you give your story and a bit of a rundown of how cannabis became of interest to you.
Yeah, absolutely. You can hear me okay, right?
I can.
Volume's good?
Perfect. Absolutely.
Okay, great. Well, I played professional football in the NFL, American football, for 6 years as an offensive lineman, tackle, guard, a little bit of tight end. And what comes with that, what's pretty par for the course, I was having a conversation with one of my old mentors, one of my old offensive line mentors earlier today, and he rattled off the laundry list of injuries that he suffered during his 12-year NFL career.
Wow.
And we were laughing about it because it's really just part of the game. You know, I had shoulder surgery, I had back surgery, torn muscles all over my body. Looking back at my career, I suffered a handful of concussions, had my bell rung a number of times. You know, and that's just part of the game. That's part of the nature of football. It's part of the nature of collision sports like football is. And so going back a little bit, I was very blessed to be raised by holistically minded parents. My parents were very much of the philosophy, food is medicine, exercise as much as possible, drink plenty of water, use whatever natural means are available before going to a doctor to be prescribed some sort of medication.
Mm-hmm.
That was just sort of the ethos of our family. And that really translated into my football career, especially when I started playing football at the age of 13, my freshman year of high school. And it was really a straight line trajectory from there. Everything I did, thought about, how I trained, how I ate, how I carried myself was all in alignment to reach this goal of making it to the NFL, of climbing this mountain of football. And with that, God bless my mom, her intuitive instincts kicked into gear, and she was dragging my brother and I to yoga classes and getting all sorts of extracurricular work in, which really gave me this wonderful foundation of a deep intuitive knowledge of my body, how it works, how it functions. With that, I've always been a very sensitive guy, very intuitive myself. I've always paid great attention to what goes into my body, how it makes me feel, and what it does for me, whether that's food, drink, substances, etc. And I think as athletes, we kind of have that because you're so tapped into the state of your physical well-being. The mind-body connection is so key as far as your athletic performance goes. So with that, you know, I came to cannabis as many curious teenagers did. I always felt this sort of gravitational pull towards it, and other plant medicines as well. I remember having these ideas come to me about doing peyote journeys in the desert with groups of people when I was like 16 or 17 years old.
Wow.
And so, and that has to do with my lineage and my first American ancestor being a witch who came to America in the 1600s, was on trial for witchcraft 3 times, was a nature worshiper, and all sorts of cool background like that I've only really come into knowing in the last few years. But it's really given me a lot of context around how I think about the world and how I think about things like cannabis, and why I had this sort of intuitive curiosity about it. So I had some typical cannabis experiences in my teenage years, very intense, scary experiences that really took me away from it. I really wanted nothing to do with cannabis for a long time until I got to college. And it was after my freshman year of football, where the season had come to an end. I had redshirted. I was really beat down. Redshirting, if you aren't familiar with that, it's basically you sit out for a season, but you do everything with the team but play in the games.
Okay.
As an offensive lineman, that's a good move because it allows you time for your physical body to develop, get stronger, get bigger, etc. I went from, 260, 6'6", 260 pounds when I reported to the University of Arizona at the age of 17 to, 6'6", 310 pounds the
Wow.
next year.
Wow.
So that's a lot of eating, a lot of weightlifting. It's
That's
crazy,
huge.
but that's the power of a elite level training program as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
But so going back, my first season of college had ended. I felt beat to hell. I was super sore. I was exhausted physically, mentally, emotionally. Being a student athlete is one of the most difficult things you could possibly do. Having to commit to your sport and commit to school, it's super difficult.
Yeah.
And so the season had ended, and all of us offensive linemen had gotten together at one of our buddies' houses. We had a bonfire in the backyard, and someone had a joint of cannabis. And it started being passed around. And I remember smoking it and looking up at the stars, feeling this incredible brotherly connection, this sort of galvanizing of our brotherhood and what we had just been through. So there's this very spiritual element to it. But the real power and my understanding of cannabis as medicine came the following day when I woke up the next morning and I felt so rejuvenated. Physically, I felt like I could go back out and play football again. Like my
Wow.
body felt healed. I felt rested. I felt like I had gotten the best sleep of my life in that night. And I thought to myself, man, if we had been up drinking all night, I would feel like shit today. I wouldn't be able to do anything. And so that really planted this seed of cannabis as a healing tool, especially in this super gladiator driven world that I was really committed to and loved, playing football. So it's very difficult, obviously, to navigate drug tests at the college level. So throughout my college career, there wasn't a whole lot more cannabis use. But once I got to the NFL, there's really only an annual drug test for cannabis. Cannabis is under what the NFL calls the substance of abuse list.
Yeah.
And you're tested once a year, and you have a general idea of when that test is going to happen. It's going to happen sometime between when you report to the facility for spring training to about the first week of training camp in August. So you have about a 5 to 6 month window when you can be tested for cannabis. And once you have the test, that's it. You can use cannabis or pretty much whatever you want other than performance enhancers, which is, that's a whole other conversation of the
Absolutely.
ludicrous nature of the NFL's drug testing policy. But so you're free to use cannabis as you need it, as you will. And that's what I did. And really, it had as much to do with the accepted protocols and my experience with opiates and pharmaceutical anti-inflammatories like Cataflam, Indocin, Celebrex, these things that wreak havoc on your digestive system, on your liver and kidneys. I mean, very young men, guys I played with are, suffering from kidney failure, liver damage, have all kinds of issues. And it's a direct result of the prescription pill protocols that every guy in an NFL locker room is dealing with. I mean, 98% of a guy in an NFL locker room, myself included for a long time, are on a daily regimen of prescription anti-inflammatories.
Because you're always injured, yeah.
Yeah, and you're sore as hell, and it's
Yeah.
the easiest way to get you out of pain and onto the field to produce, to do what you have to do to make the team money.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and so that combined with a number of surgeries I had during my career. I had shoulder surgery my second year in the NFL. At the same time, I was dealing with a herniated disc in my back and
Ooh.
extreme sciatic pain down my right leg, to the point where my right foot I couldn't feel it on the ground. And I was, after surgery for my shoulder, I was given a prescription of Vicodin, like you always are, at least in America. That's kind of the way it goes. And, you know, I remember feeling so vividly after, you know, 1 or 2 days of prescribed usage, waking up with severe withdrawal symptoms, 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, shooting pains in my gut, cold sweats, chills, and couldn't go back to sleep. And that's just my body needing more pills just to feed the withdrawal symptoms, not even anything to do with the pain, really. Not to mention that it never really did anything for my pain anyway, I found. And on top of that, it made me extremely emotionally volatile. My rage, I had like this simmering rage, was just on the surface of my being. You know, I was on a hair trigger in an already vulnerable state where I just had surgery. My mom, and then later on, after back surgery, my girlfriend, who became my wife. I need them to help me get dressed. I need them to help me with just about everything in my life. And here I am lashing out at them for literally anything. And I found myself going, whoa, what's going on here? What's happening to me? You know, and
Gosh.
it was, I very, like I said, with that sort of athlete's intuition, I very quickly realized that every time I took these pills, I felt horrible. You know, they made me feel insane. They made me feel totally crazed, the withdrawal symptoms. So very quickly in my career, it was about 3 years of this really feeling the effects of opiates and really understanding in myself how these things reacted in my body.
Yeah.
So by the time my 4th NFL year came around, I no longer used opiates. It just, I knew they didn't work for me, and cannabis really became my preferred source of pain management and healing. And that was really intuitive because, like, just as I had been shown through the plant that fateful night at the end of my first year of college football, you know, throughout my football career, I had this experience of being able to come home from a long day of the grind. I could smoke some cannabis, which, you know, at that time, this is 2009 to 2014, living in Florida and Illinois, you know, all I had access to was a bag of flour, basically, from the trusted team dealer. You know, there wasn't all of these fabulous cannabis products that we have now that I have access to living in California.
Absolutely.
But that was better than nothing. And I could come home, I could smoke some cannabis, I could feel the emotional and physical pain, strain, decompress. I felt myself, I was able to relax. I was able to connect with my family members. I was able to get a good night's sleep and wake up feeling recovered and rejuvenated. And so cannabis really, like I said, it became my preferred source of pain management. I used it pretty frequently. I mean, just about every day that I could, I used cannabis in my NFL career. And I believe I came out of my football career in better shape because of it than guys who were unwilling to use it. And so when I retired, I wrote this long article that was published in sportsillustrated.com about my experience dealing with injuries and the prescription pill protocols in the NFL. I talked about a little bit about my cannabis use, and this got a lot of reach,
Mm, I can
even to the
imagine.
point where one of my former athletic trainers called me up really pissed off about,
you,
and I said, hey
you
man,
confessed all.
yeah, I'm like, dude, I didn't call you out. I didn't even think this was any of your fault, but that speaks more to his insecurity than what I said.
Absolutely.
Um, so from there, I got connected with one of my all-time, my childhood football heroes, a guy named Kyle Turley, who's really been the tip of the spear in the cannabis for football players movement, as far as speaking out about it and really, really getting this idea of cannabis as medicine, especially to treat traumatic brain injuries and concussions, and be a preventative for CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy, which just about every football player is suffering from or is in danger of suffering from.
Yeah.
So I got connected with him. He said, hey Eb, I'm hosting a cannabis panel out in Phoenix. I would love for you to come, share your story. Think it would mean a lot. And at the time, I didn't know what I was doing with my life. My identity was completely obliterated, having just left the NFL. And so I said, sure, man. I'm a big fan of yours. I believe in the plant. I don't know exactly what my story will do for anyone out there, but I'm willing to come and share it. So I went to this first cannabis conference. It was in Phoenix, Arizona. I'm on a panel with Kyle Turley, Ricky Williams, and Nate Jackson, three guys I have a tremendous amount of respect for, all former NFL players. I finished telling my story, and it's in this room, this conference hall filled with, there must have been 700 to 1,000 people in there. It's still to this day the biggest conference I've ever spoken at.
Wow.
And I've spoken at a lot, it's interesting. Like for 4 years, I kind of went on this tour with a bunch of these guys, men and women, who all share this story of cannabis as medicine during or after their playing careers, which has been really beautiful to connect with this community of
Absolutely.
very holistically minded people. And I finished telling my story, and I'm looking around this room, and it's cancer survivors, it's military veterans, it's these families with children deeply affected by Dravet syndrome or other severe seizure disorders. It's traumatic brain injury survivors, from car crashes and everything else in between. And I'm struck by the breadth, the spectrum of people that cannabis has had a positive impact on. And as I'm having this realization of how much bigger this is than me and my story, Kyle Turley starts sharing, and he immediately opens up with the federal government. American federal government has a patent on cannabinoids as neuroprotectants and antioxidants. Patent 6,630,507. And my fucking mind is blown. My whole life,
No wonder
every,
why.
yeah, my whole experience has come into a crystal, it's just crystallized in this one moment. And because throughout my football career, I kept my cannabis use very personal and very private. I was always a captain. I was always a team leader. And so for me to have a coach or even my teammates really find out that I was quote unquote a stoner or something like that was just horrifying to me. So to have my intuitive understanding of what this plant had been doing for me throughout my football career legitimized through a government sanctioned patent on the chemical compounds found in the plant that I use as medicine was just so powerful. And it really lit this fire of wanting to learn as much as I could about the plant, the science behind it, the history behind it, really understand what this was. And then it further empowered me to speak my truth. You know, and then from there, then he went into how we all have an endocannabinoid system. And I'm just like, what the fuck? You know, our bodies are built to interact with this plant. And not only that, but our bodies produce endogenous cannabinoids. Anandamide, the bliss molecule, to facilitate all these different processes, our appetite, our mood, how we feel and deal with pain, our sleep rhythms, etc. It's amazing. And I think every day it seems like at this point, we're finding out something else that the endocannabinoid system is involved in, some other process.
Absolutely.
So that is really how I came into my cannabis activism, my cannabis advocacy, you know, and so
Incredible.
yeah, and you know, just to round that out, I started a organization called Athletes for Care with all of these like-minded former pro and collegiate athletes who have all shared a similar story. Whether it's that cannabis helped them during their career dealing with pain and injuries, or it helped them transition out of their career and has helped them re-identify themselves and find themselves in life after sports. I founded a CBD company, which I've since left, but it was a great experience. And it was just, you know, business happens and that's the way it goes. And that was a big learning experience. And as my, you know, as a guy who is not very business minded, to get a very firsthand masterclass in the inner workings of starting a business. So
that's tricky.
I'm really, you know, I feel really blessed, and I've learned a lot. And every day I feel more and more empowered to speak my truth. And even as I sort of move into other realms of healing, whether that's other plant medicines or meditation or breath work, I seem to be called back to cannabis time and time again, even like in this, to do this interview, this podcast. So
absolutely.
It's very cool, and it's a very big part of my life.
That's incredible. I love that, because it is so taboo, even though you know, some states of America have it legalized now, which I'll talk about a bit in a minute. Here it is very much illegal, unfortunately. And that's also why I wanted to not only study it, but also spread that information wide and clear, because it is still so taboo for so many people. And from just doing the research and being involved in the medicine myself, it's incredible. It's a nuanced, overarching, wide scope medicine that we can use for so many different things. And like you say, the research has come in more and more about what we can use it for. So it's just, it just keeps on coming. And that's amazing in itself. But with specifically sport, you know, a lot of people would assume that it would be diminishing in performance, you know, it would be something that people would need a lot of convincing for. So how have you gone convincing people, should I say? Is it something that has been hard? Is it something that's been easy? Or have you had a lot of flack for it, in other words?
Yeah, it's interesting. That's an interesting question. You know, when I started on this thing, I felt I had a very strong sense of having completely alienated myself from my former world. But what's so interesting, and there was a huge New York Post article posted where I was on the cover of the New York Post, and the headline was, "I played stoned."
You can't get any more
crazy
than that.
And I woke up to the Twitter windstorm, and I was a little bit horrified. You know, I was a little bit horrified because that I felt like that wasn't portrayed properly,
Yeah.
obviously.
Media
Um,
tends to do that, don't they?
yeah, the media is the number one, is public enemy number one of the people. But at the same time, since then, a lot of that has been rectified for me. And what's so interesting is I've had some of my former team doctors reach out to me and say, Eb, I've been following you since you left.
Wow.
I'm so blown away by what you're doing. I've stopped prescribing opiates to the guys because I see what it does to them now. I think
Wow.
you've been so ahead of the curve as far as cannabis and CBD goes. And that's actually how I met Mike Tyson. I was introduced to him through a former team doctor
Mm-hmm.
who said, Eb, it looks like you're the tip of the spear in this cannabis for athletes movement. I'd love to introduce you to Mike Tyson. I'm coming out next week to LA to a medical summit being put on by him and his company. And I think you'd be a great fit to just as a relationship with them. And that started this whole thing. I ended up putting on the whole panel for Mike and his team. I brought in a bunch of athletes, neuroscientists, doctors,
Wow.
researchers. Yeah, it was awesome. And that was a big full circle moment to have somebody from my past life come in and say and acknowledge the work I'd been doing, acknowledge the truth I'd been speaking, and really in a positive way. And
Mm.
that has been sort of the unfolding of this whole thing. Is now I've become the guy who everybody comes to ask about cannabis advice. Where do I start? What's the best way to go about it? How do I do it, etc.
Mm.
And so it really, if there's any lessons in that for me, if there's any lessons in this for me and for anybody, really, it's to speak your truth at all times, no matter the cost.
Yeah.
Because the truth is like gravity,
Mm-hmm.
and it's interesting. I posted things on social media about gravity, and I've got all the high intellectuals telling me gravity doesn't exist. And I'm like, well, whatever, and that's cool. Whatever you call the magnetization of the
Yeah.
universe,
Yeah.
the thing that you can't avoid,
Mm.
there are certain things, it's metaphysical truths,
Mm-hmm.
the reality that, physics time and time again is proving of the unseen nature of this world. Certain things like cannabis as medicine are one of those truths. It's not something I'm just making up. This is not my opinion. This is a scientific reality
Mm-hmm.
that is proven more and more. The farther we go down this rabbit hole, the more validated we are in the efficacy of it and what it
Absolutely.
can and can't do. So at first it was really hard, you know.
Mm.
Obviously I had my community of people, all of these NFL guys. We started Athletes for Care, which brought in, Olympians and UFC fighters and NBA players and NHL players and rugby players from all
Wow.
around the world. So we had this community, and I just kept my focus on that. I kept my focus on my family. I kept my focus on speaking my truth and
Mm-hmm.
continuing to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I think you kind of cross over this boundary. You transcend this boundary of being worried about what other people think when you feel really empowered in your truth, you
Absolutely.
know, and that's what that knowledge of the federal patent, cannabinoids as neuroprotectants and antioxidants. You can go look it up. People
Yeah.
listening to this, go Google it right
Absolutely.
now. Patent 6,630,507. It's right there in black and white ink. And
Among many other things that have now been
oh yeah,
approved
exactly.
and patented.
Exactly.
Mm.
So, once you're empowered in your truth, it doesn't really matter what anybody says. So, I got a little bit of flack that day on Twitter, and for the most part, it was always really positive. It was really just self-inflicted fear,
Yeah.
you know, of
Mm.
just thinking, oh God, you know, my high school coaches, what are they going to think of me now? And in fact, my high school coaches adore me more than ever,
Oh.
you know, to the point where, you know, this year, my old high school head coach, who's now the athletic director of the school sports program, asked me to come and speak to the kids, you know,
Amazing.
and it's like, wow, you know, just speak your truth, you know, and
Absolutely.
live from the heart. That's about the best we can do.
Absolutely. And these plant medicines, including cannabis, they speak for themselves. Really, that's what
Yeah.
I've found. You can't help but listen to what they have to say or pay attention to what they're doing to our bodies when they're interacting, especially cannabis and other plant medicines, with the whole of our body, with the receptors, with the little components of our bodies. We can't deny that. So I think that's pretty important for everyone to understand.
Absolutely.
Mm.
It's so true. Yeah.
So on that, from that flack that you may have gotten, now on to this propaganda, this demonizing of cannabis. And I know you talk a lot about this, and I wanted to cover it because still here in Australia, people think that there's stoners and those weed heads and pot heads and all these lovely words that they use to describe it. And I still say to my clients to this day, I say, well, have you tried cannabis? And they look at me like I've just committed a crime.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So we're working really hard to get it here legalized for use. CBD is now going to be out and able to be prescribed by pharmacists next year, which will actually this year in February. So we're
That's
getting
great.
there. Yeah, we're getting there, but it's still not where I believe it should be, especially for pain management, which is a lot of clients that I see need it for. But where did this propaganda start from? And the
Mm,
demonizing, and how can we get out of that? And I know, you know, America's in a different way than Australia, but I'd be
mm.
interested to hear your opinion.
Well, as far as I can tell, America set the tone for the entire world when it comes to cannabis.
Mm-hmm.
In certain things they did. And that it really all started with the Marijuana Tax Act of 1937 here in the US, which was a guy named Harry Anslinger, who's the head of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, in partnership with William Randolph Hearst, the DuPont family, and
Mm-hmm.
Carnegie Mellon. And what was going down was a lot of business interests were being affected by the rise of cannabis cultivation and distribution. Cannabis, up until 1937, was a very widely prescribed element of the American pharmacopoeia. You could go to the local drugstore and get all sorts of cannabis tinctures to treat everything from insomnia to impotence and everything in between.
Mm-hmm.
There were hashish parlors all throughout New York City, where you could go, and just like a bar nowadays where you could go and get yourself a beer, you could go and smoke hashish. Our founding fathers, in fact, the American colonies of America, it was mandated that farmers grow hemp to pay Great Britain in taxes with. It was the most valued material of the most powerful military group on the planet, the British Navy. This is way back, going back in the like 1700s.
Mm-hmm.
And so cannabis has always been a very highly profitable, highly valued crop right up until 1937. William Randolph Hearst had acres and acres of paper trees. And the truth was, you could grow an acre of hemp for way cheaper than an acre of trees, and you could do a whole lot more with it. So it infringed upon an entire industry that he was involved in. He was the biggest publisher on the planet. And so from his angle, he started an entire propaganda campaign against cannabis, which they coined marijuana. Marijuana is actually the term of a strain of Mexican tobacco, but they wanted to create this racist fear propaganda and say blacks and Mexicans are smoking cannabis, getting high, and running through the streets and raping white women. And they created this whole ethos around it, this whole fear ethos around the plant. Carnegie Mellon and DuPont, they were involved in oil and steel. And cannabis at the time, Henry Ford was starting to build cars out of hemp fibers. And the hemp fibers were more durable, they were lighter, they were stronger than steel, and it was easier to produce. So that was infringing on the steel industry. Meanwhile, Harry Anslinger is a racist asshole who was hell-bent on control and manipulation of the American population. He was on a power trip. So they came together. They created the 1937 Marijuana Tax Act, which made it illegal to cultivate, distribute, sell cannabis of any kind. But what's interesting about this time period, which you have to dig a little bit to find, is that the mayor of New York City at the time, Fiorello LaGuardia, he put together a whole board of doctors, medical professionals to debunk the claims of the Marijuana Tax Act and what they were saying, why they were making it illegal. Because LaGuardia came to these guys and he said, look, I've got 300 pissed off hash parlor owners pounding on my door saying this has just destroyed their entire business. Can we figure out if this is real? And you can go and research the LaGuardia report, which debunks everything that these guys were saying. It's because they said cannabis makes you violent. They did myriad tests on hundreds and hundreds of people and disproved all of those claims. So that was really interesting. Absolutely. Then the war on drugs continued this with Nixon, and he really used cannabis. That's when cannabis became a Schedule I narcotic, which means it has no medical benefit whatsoever, and you can't even research it, which is hilarious because, you know, of the surrounding aspects of this, the federal government getting their own patent on it, etc.
Absolutely.
But Nixon really used cannabis and heroin for the most part, weaponized them to tear down his two greatest enemies politically, which were the hippies and African Americans. So he used them to throw countless people in jail, to do all sorts of things, destroy and destabilize families and homes, etc. So cannabis has been a political tool for a long time, weaponized to control minds, to control the public, to control all aspects of our being. I think, you know, what's really interesting about, you know, hearing you say, you know, all the name calling, all the names that people come up with for cannabis.
We get to myths later as well on that note.
Yeah. And so it's really interesting, especially in America. And we're seeing it now with our political climate and everything going down today. It's very heavy times here.
Oh, yeah. Today's an interesting
you know,
day.
Yeah. And me, honestly, I'm a bit of an anarchist myself. So it's interesting to just watch the whole system crumble under its own weight. But at the same time, you know, we're a very judgmental culture. We're a very critical culture of people who want to think for themselves, of people who want to go their own way, who believe in natural healing remedies in particular. I think we've seen that all unveiled through the COVID paradigm shift, you know, where even health and well-being is now being politically weaponized to divide people and make people think all sorts of insane things.
Absolutely.
So, you know, I don't know if, you know, it's once again, it's like standing in your truth, standing in your empowered knowing of what's real and what's true, and having the knowledge to back up your intuition. Because to me, I'll take 1,000 years of anecdotal experience over any test, any research study, any day. You know, people have been using the cannabis plant for at least 10,000 years,
Absolutely.
for all sorts of things, for its medicinal uses, for its material uses as clothing, as rope, as industrial materials. And so there's a reason for that. One of
Mm.
my favorite stories of cannabis origin mythology, and I don't even
Mm.
know if it's mythology, I kind of tend to believe it.
Mm-hmm.
One of the other benefits of being raised by yogis and holistically minded people is that I don't really believe anything, but by the same token, I don't discount anything either. You know, and so that's really,
I think it's a good way to be.
yeah, it's given me the blessing of really freedom of thought, you know,
Mm.
and finding it out for myself. And I don't really believe anything 100% unless I've experienced it for myself. And even that is never 100%. You know, we're constantly moving and shifting. And I mean, this whole universe is in constant flux and flow. So how
Absolutely.
can even us, you know, something that works for you, that worked for you 10 years ago doesn't work for you now,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Absolutely.
But so there was a famous French explorer, his name always escapes me, but he was working his way through West Africa and he came upon the Dogon tribe.
Mm.
And the Dogon tribe are very interesting. They have an annual cannabis festival where they celebrate the day these beings from the Sirius star, the dog star, came down and brought them the cannabis plant. And they said, this plant will bring you peace. This plant will be your food. This plant will be your clothing. This plant will be your medicine. And this explorer went to the chief, and the chief said, yeah, go up to these the caves up on the hill, and you'll see our entire origin story.
Mm.
So he goes up there, and there are these super intricate cave paintings that they've done of these meetings with the people from the Sirius stars, and they had actually charted where the Sirius stars were. And at the time, I guess we only thought there was one Sirius star, but they had charted how there's two plus another thing, a planet or a star, I can't remember exactly. But they had charted it exactly as it was. And he came down and he said, how do you guys know this? He's like, well, I mean, they told us. You know, we're not fucking, we didn't make it up, you know. Here it is. They gave us the information.
Yeah.
And so something really interesting about cannabis means two dogs, from the two dog stars, Sirius A and B, brought to the Dogon tribe to bring peace and food and medicine to the people. So I've always loved that story. And I think
Mm.
that really speaks to the essence of the cannabis plant. It is really here. It truly, you know, no matter how much we try to stigmatize it, demonize it, politicize it, make it illegal, restrict its use, it finds a way to show itself again and
Absolutely.
again, and
Absolutely.
and and come to our rescue, you know, as a species. So
Absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah.
I saw an article the other day on some recent discoveries. I'm pretty sure this is right. It was 28 million years they found the origins of cannabis in Tibet or near Tibet. 28
That's
million years.
incredible.
That's
That's
incredible.
incredible. Of course.
So,
It's amazing.
that many years, a lot of years.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you now, talking about ways of administration, ways of
Mhm.
taking what your preferred choice is. We're talking, mixtures. We're talking isolates. We're talking all sorts of different ways you can take cannabis. What's your preferred method? What have you found out in your use, and what do you normally not recommend, but also talk with people about for specifically sport use, but also others?
Well, I don't recommend this, but my preferred usage is smoking it.
Mm-hmm.
That's always been my preferred use.
Vaping or smoking?
Smoking, like
Okay.
rolling up a joint and
Yeah.
smoking. Um, I enjoy the ceremonial aspect of that.
Mm-hmm.
I feel as though I get the most out of the plant in that form. I
Mm-hmm.
have never, as an athlete, I've never had issues with lung capacity or my breathing. But, I know that's not for everyone. And I know that as a healing modality, that's not necessarily the most effective thing to suggest to people. So I don't recommend that, but that is my preferred
Mm-hmm.
way to consume it. That
Mm-hmm.
being said, I have really come to love tinctures,
Mm-hmm.
oil,
Yeah.
high quality MCT oil that's infused with CBD and THC.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I usually like a 1-to-1, but I found that up to an 8-to-1 ratio CBD to THC is super effective for managing inflammation and any pain that I might be dealing with. It's also, I use CBD in my coffee in the
Mm-hmm.
morning. I think
Mm-hmm.
CBD mixed with caffeine, it's like a
So
rocket ship
good.
to clarity.
Oh yeah.
Um, so tinctures, I also really like when I can get them when they're available, CBD capsules. I'm a
Mm-hmm.
fan of just supplementing CBD, taking it all the time. I believe that CBD should be used, just as any other vitamin.
Mm-hmm.
It's super important for our overall well-being.
Yeah.
I definitely feel much clearer, much lighter when I use CBD.
Mm-hmm.
THC, though, is super medicinal as well. I mean, as you know, THC is the thing, especially for people who have suffered concussions and brain injuries. THC is the thing that really goes into the brain and cleans up all of that amyloid plaque and the things that all that crusty shit that develops in our brain, over time
Absolutely.
due to the cascade of hormonal response anytime you deal with a concussion or a brain injury. So THC is super medicinal, and that early on, athletes I feel love to really stick to the CBD advocacy because that's just sort of easier to deal with since you can say, oh, it doesn't get you high, but at the same
Absolutely.
time, there's a very medicinal aspect to getting high. It's okay to laugh and feel good when you're in pain, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And I think that, being high has been very stigmatized.
Absolutely. It's almost
And
like we're scared of it in
yeah,
our
exactly.
current culture. We haven't had experience like they did in other cultures where they were getting medicinal plant medicines all the time
Yeah,
and used to
yeah,
that experience.
yeah. Well, I mean, that goes to my next point, which is most of the people I've met who have had a bad trip or had a bad experience when being high, it's usually because they're being shown something in themselves that they are unwilling to accept, and that's the case with all plant medicine. I mean, that's what it
Absolutely.
does. It
Absolutely.
it takes us to the depths of ourselves, and it's our job to let it go, breathe through it, and recognize it, or you can fight against it and have a really difficult time.
Absolutely. It's one thing it's been the scariest thing that I've ever gone through was an ayahuasca ceremony.
Oh yeah, yeah,
The best and the scariest at the same time.
yeah, for sure, absolutely.
Teaches you quick, that one. Oh
Yeah,
boy. so so some of these preferred methods, and I like to say this because I think the combination of the CBD and the THC plus the other cannabinoids, which
uh-huh,
there's so many. There's delta 8 that they're discovering, CBN, CBGs. There's
yeah,
so many that are coming through the literature now and being proven to be working in many different ways on the body. But I still, even from my research, I've seen that the combination of all of them together in a whole plant form is really, you can't top that. And that's the way it's been
Definitely.
designed and grown and for us to be using. So I think, smoking it or vaping it or taking the whole plant extract, I would always say is far better than any other form. But then obviously there's those medicinal parts as well, like you say, the CBD every day without getting high. So that's then
Uh-huh.
that option. So
Absolutely. Well, when I take the CBD, I'm always looking for a whole plant extract too. So that's a
yeah,
great point. I mean, that is very important, and I believe in that as well.
yeah,
Um, the other thing that I always think is worth mentioning is I eat a lot of hemp seeds.
yeah,
You know, they're super nutritious. They got a full protein profile. It's good stuff. I mean, the plant has so much to offer in all of
absolutely,
its aspects.
absolutely. I wanted to touch on quickly just about myths, and I know one of the main myths is IQ or memory loss is very common.
Mm.
I'm not sure what the most common myths that you've heard coming through, or you've been asked.
Yeah, I mean, cannabis makes you dumb.
Yeah.
Yeah, lowers your IQ. It affects your short-term memory
Mhm.
significantly. Makes you lazy. That's a
Mhm.
big one.
Mhm.
Um,
Or
you
unmotivated.
know, or unmotivated.
Mhm.
And that all comes down to you at the end of the day.
Absolutely.
Even
Absolutely.
through it's been interesting. I mean, in America specifically, a lot of the people who have been speaking out against lockdowns keep saying, well, yeah, the powers that be just want you sitting on the couch watching TV, smoking pot all day. And I'm like, whoa, 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 dude.
Whoa. Where did
Why
pot
are
come into
you
this?
why are you bringing the pot smokers into this, man? Like that has nothing to do with it.
Oh, it's
Like
die hard, isn't it?
yeah,
Oh.
I'm against the lockdowns as much as anybody, but at the same time, the cannabis users are probably the most some of the most free thinking people we have in this country. And, some of the most successful, most powerful people I've met in my life are usually cannabis users.
Mhm.
So I think there's something to that. And throughout history, it's been the same. George
Mm.
Washington grew it. Thomas Jefferson spent years in France as a diplomat, enjoying many hashish parlors there, which inspired him to bring the idea to America when he came back. So, I mean, all of the greatest thinkers throughout history have been cannabis and or plant medicine users.
Absolutely.
It's extremely effective in its ability to free the mind from the structures of culture.
Mm.
I think that's extremely valuable. And also, I mean, one of my favorite times to use cannabis is before a workout. So it's never had that effect on me. That all has to do with the individual user.
Yeah.
And obviously, like anything else, it can be abused and used in a negative way where it shuts you down and disconnects you from yourself. Of course, we all
Yeah.
have things that we go to escape our pain, difficult times, the things we don't want to look at. And cannabis can definitely be used in that way as well.
Mm. And I think a lot goes to say with the literature there is that, or even people's experiences, is that it's the chicken and the egg scenario. Like, what came first? Was it the bad behaviors or the bad thoughts and then the use of cannabis, and then that just perpetuated? Or was it the other way around? And they still can't see that. They still can't prove that, because it's the type of
Yeah.
person that's going to be using it is the addictor.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Absolutely.
yeah, I think a lot of people don't actually realize that when they're using these latent words of pothead, and the person may
Uh-huh.
have been unmotivated to start with.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it all has to do with, I'm fascinated by a lot a lot of things in our culture here in America specifically. I'm not sure if Australia is the same in this way, but you turn on the TV, especially watching a football game on Sunday, and it's 75%, if not more, ads for pharmaceuticals. a pill for this and that and all sorts of things. And it's really, we've created this through what I believe is the pharmaceutical paradigm, is that, whatever it is you're dealing with, it's not your fault. You can take a pill for it.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes people out of taking responsibility for themselves and their life. And it disempowers people, because now it's not about you, it's about all the things out there. There's always something out there to blame everything on, And on
Absolutely.
top of that, uh, your health and well-being is this body. I mean, I think Jesus said it, your body is your temple, And it's true. Like, it really matters what you put into it. It matters how you take care of it.
Mm-hmm.
Even the thoughts you have about yourself, how you think about yourself, how you think about your life, it all really matters. And we've
Absolutely.
been disconnected from that.
Mm-hmm.
We've been disillusioned with the power of our humanity. And it's a big issue right now, I think.
Huge issue. And I think it's really turning everything around. And we're at a bit of a tip of the spear, as you would say, of what is going to happen next. It's sort of, we're on that tipping edge of like, ooh, this is interesting. And I'm fascinated to be watching it as well. Yeah,
definitely.
But one of the things that fascinated me about cannabis all along, as from when I was a child, but when I was trying it out as a teenager, and one of the most horrible experiences that I had was eating way too much edible cannabis, a chocolate cake that we didn't know was there, and I was gone for 2 days out of this world. But but what it does is it slows down time, it slows down thought patterns, it gets you into a different dimension of thought, of reality, and so in that space, it creates, that's what's always just gotten me, is that how it stretches time out. And you can have those extra thoughts and associations with yourselves, or ways to think about things very, very differently. And those who don't get that aspect, I think, are missing out a lot. And that's where that flow state happens, as you've done a lot of creative writing and back in the day in university, and it's very art orientated. It gets you into that very beautiful flow even more so. And that's my experience as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, that's kind of, I don't know, the more I learn about myself and the more I let go of things and get clear on my purpose and who I am on this planet, I'm really interested in the unseen. I'm really interested in the reality behind reality, the supreme reality that we all find ourselves in. And cannabis and LSD and DMT and psilocybin, these are all magnificent keys into that dimension of what's happening behind all the shit that we just see and take for granted,
Absolutely.
So,
it makes you live a very much more conscious and aware life when you're here, just having those experiences every so often.
Definitely. And it taps you into the true majesty of being a human being. Like, what a fucking magnificent miracle it is that we are all.
Absolutely.
It's so crazy. I'm struck, I don't know, maybe I've done too many of these things, but I find myself in moments, I'm struck by the incredible experience of being human. Like, all the things in the universe, this thing is fucking unfathomably massive and infinite and eternal. And here we are, we're having this little experience, as a tiny particle of it all. And all the things that we hold on so tightly to, and the beliefs we have and how we identify ourselves, it's so funny, because,
seems so petty.
And yeah, it's really so petty because it's so beautiful. It's so beautiful to just wake up every morning and breathe and drink a cup of coffee and see the sunshine and hear the birds chirping
Yeah.
and look at the face of your loved ones. You know, we take it so for granted,
So
you
much.
know,
So much. And I
and
don't
it's
think
just such a
there's
miracle.
absolutely. I think we need more people feeling this way to be able to have and create the world that we all would like to see, really,
Yeah,
not
yeah,
what's going on at the moment.
yeah.
So, Evan, I don't want to take too much more of your time, but I wanted to finish off on a few things, and I wanted to ask you what your major things that you do in your life that are a part of your life every day, or that you recommend for people. Tips for wellness, health, happiness, all the stuff that we've just spoken about. Are there things in your day every day that you have to include to make that happen?
Yep, yep. I have to meditate. I meditate for at least 30 minutes a day, first thing in the morning, and then usually I try to get at least another little 10-minute or 20-minute meditation in the middle of the day or late afternoon. Meditation is key. Meditation has been transformative for me. And I'm talking about very simple mindfulness meditation, sitting in a chair with a straight spine, closing your eyes and just tuning into either listening to your breath go in and out of your nose, or if you can, this is a little more advanced, but one of my favorite techniques to use is pretend you put on a pair of invisible headphones and just listen to the sounds that are happening, that are coming into your ears. And it really expedites the process of transcending your thoughts. And your thoughts are going to come. And for a long time, you know, for a long time, I was like, you know, I'm going to meditate my way out of thinking. I'm not going to think anymore, you know? And the truth of the matter is, yeah, your brain is built to think, you know, and thinking is part of the thing. Um, your relationship to your thoughts changes, you know, and your relationship to yourself changes. And so in your meditation practice, you're going to sit there, you're going to get really good. You're going to start to focus in on your breath. And then all of a sudden, some memory is going to float into view, or some thought about what you're doing later on in the day is going to float into view. And you might get carried away on that train of thought. You might get carried away for a few minutes. And all of a sudden, you'll go, oh, fuck, I'm meditating. And that's the moment. That's the moment where you just bring your attention right back to your breath. And you just do that over and over again. And you do that. It might be 1,000 times in 10 minutes. And you just keep bringing yourself back to your breath. Keep tuning into your breath. And after you do that, I've been meditating now every day for the last 4 years. And I'm a completely different person than I was 4 years ago. I'm a completely different person than I was a year ago. And something miraculous begins to happen because your whole life becomes a meditation, and you start to be in the moment, and you start to transcend all the bullshit that you've been carrying around with yourself for so long, you know. And even in your interactions with loved ones, like I've been sort of awestruck sitting across from my wife having a conversation where I realized for so long I have engaged with her in a way that I'm almost anticipating what she's saying. And when you come in, when you're communicating with someone through this preconceived lens of relationship, you start to do that thing where you take it for granted. But then all of a sudden you have this moment where you're like, oh my God, this is a living, breathing human in flux right in front of me. And I have no idea what's going to come out next. And you're struck by this. Once again, you have this little instance of being struck by the magic of life. So meditation, I recommend it to everybody. Beyond anything else I really do, I'm always bringing it back to meditation because I think it's so important. And a lot of people, you know, They say, I don't have time for that. And I was one of those people for a long time. I don't have time. I can't sit and meditate. Fuck that.
Mm.
And I really got into it, and it started to transform my life in ways I could never have imagined. So meditation is one. Breath work is another thing I do every day. I do a mixture of what people would know as the Wim Hof
Mm-hmm.
technique, which is really, he created his whole, the Wim Hof method is all based on this breath work that was innovated, discovered, created by Tibetan monks called Tumo,
Mm-hmm.
which is they had to use this because they lived up in the Himalayas and had to, battle freezing cold temperatures. And so the Tumo breathing, it energizes you, it heats up your body temperature. It's fantastic. It's great for clarity. It alkalizes your system. There's so much good in it. But also just really tapping into nose breathing, and everything I do when I work out, I'm always just breathing through in and out through my nose. And
Mm.
this does so many good things. It's really
Incredible.
profound.
Mm.
It's a fantastic trainer of your nervous system to keep you grounded in that parasympathetic nervous state. Um, so breath work is another one, and there's a million ways to do that. An app I would recommend is called Breath Work, and that's breath, BREATH, work, WRK.
Mm-hmm.
It's an unbelievable app. I'm a little disclaimer, I'm doing some work with them, but
Mm-hmm.
I think they're the best out there. I haven't come across anyone who has a breathwork app that's
No, neither have I.
as convenient, as high level. They have all sorts of things, calming breaths, energizing breaths, breaths for focus. They've got all your box breathing techniques. It's fantastic, and they've got little introductions to everything. So I highly recommend that.
Awesome.
Um,
I'll put that in the notes and try it out myself.
yeah, you definitely should,
Mm.
Jodi.
Mm.
And I could even connect you with them because I think they'd be happy to link into you and your network as well.
Amazing.
Um,
Absolutely.
and then the last thing, I would say just be mindful of how you eat. Food is critically important to your well-being. I'm not one to uh, subscribe to any specific diet. I believe that food is very personal, and there's no one size fits all for anything. I just recommend that you eat whole organic foods, whatever that is. Get high quality grass fed meats if you're into eating meat. Eat, dark green veggies. Stay away from any processed foods. Fat is good, I believe. Avocados, nuts, seeds, olive oil, coconuts. I'm a big fan of all of that. I'm pretty keto myself. I've had a very food could be another podcast one day because I've
Oh,
had a
yeah.
very
Let's do
deep,
it.
yeah, I've had a very deep personal adventure journey with food myself. Going from having to be 320 plus pounds, eating 6 meals a day, to now I eat 2 meals a day and do intermittent fasting just about every day. So on the last note with food, I highly recommend you try intermittent fasting. I think it's
Mm.
maybe the most powerful tool in your wellness arsenal is to learn how to fast. And there are ways to do it that save you time, give you more energy, give you more productivity, have spiritual components to it where you really have a chance to get in deeper touch with yourself and your emotions and clear out old shit that no longer serves you. So fasting is something I highly recommend as well.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with everything you've just said. I hear it so many times about meditation, how it's changed people's lives. and the way that you say that the thoughts come in and out, it's just that observation. I think it's so important for people to understand that you can't stop those thoughts, because that can scare
Yeah.
people off straight away.
Totally. I think a lot
Yeah.
of people come to meditation and they're like, oh, I'm going to stop thinking.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, no. But
No.
knowing that you're separate from everything and the world still goes on without you,
Uh-huh.
that's incredible in itself. You just realize that you can
Absolutely.
just be the observer, and that's
Oh,
amazing. Yeah.
that's it. That's it.
And intermittent fasting, absolutely. It's incredible for our longevity and our bodies, as well as our mental capacity to just have a break. Just in itself is just not eating, not having to know, oh, what am I going to eat next? Because that can overtake a lot of people's minds.
Totally.
Yeah,
Definitely.
absolutely. Evan, I thank you so much for sharing all your wisdom. And that is, I really, really enjoyed this conversation so much. And I would love to have a discussion with you about nutrition. That's fascinating as well.
I would love that. Thank you so much, Jodi. I really appreciate it. Anytime, just let me know. I'm here. Let's do it.
Amazing, amazing. Can we finish off, Eben, with just where to find you, where your podcasts are? Because I know you're co-host of one and host of another,
Yep.
and all your social media, if that's where you want people to contact you.
Yeah, definitely. You can check out my website, ebenbritton.com,
Mm-hmm.
EbenBritton.com. That houses pretty much everything I do, but social media, Instagram and Twitter at ED as in dog, S Britton. Those are my three initials in my last name, EDS Britton, on Instagram and Twitter. I'm much more available or present on Instagram than I am on Twitter, but I dabble a little bit. You can check out my solo podcast, The Ebb and Flow, on iTunes, Spotify, all podcast platforms. That I do. I have a lot of fun with that. I have interviews with experts talking about all sorts of things, wellness, spirituality. um,
Very cool topics I've seen you've got on there. I can't wait to get through them all.
Consciousness. Yeah, I have fun on there. I use that as sort of just a playground for myself to explore
Mm.
everything I'm interested in. I pretty frequently, I like to put up guided meditations on there. And other solo things, sort of how I think about the world. And then finally, I am the co-host of Hot Boxing with Mike Tyson. You can find that on YouTube, as well as all the podcast platforms.
Amazing. Well, thank you again for sharing all of this amazing knowledge that you have and wisdom, and just from a different perspective, which I really, really appreciate. So thank you. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Jodi.